Aloha and welcome to the Embodied Healing Self podcast with your host, Jen Mons. Each week, join me for soul-inspired, conscious conversations around embodied healing and awakening to your soul's purpose. Thank you for listening in. Aloha and welcome back this week. So this week, we're going to talk about a subject that I like to refer to as spiritual materialism. Now, I'm not the first person to create this word, and when I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing that's describing what I'm witnessing and what I've experienced myself. So this idea of spiritual materialism was first introduced by Rinpoche in his book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, who was a Tibetan Buddhist monk who brought teachings to the West. He was born sometime around, I think, 1939 and passed away at the early age of around 48 in 1987, but his teachings still go on. And so when I heard this word, I thought, yes, I can feel it. There's something there. And so I began to explore a little bit. I felt like I'd been given a word that would maybe help people to understand what they're experiencing, what I myself has experienced. Because as many people choose to open the gateway to a different path, I don't really like to use the word awaken or enlightenment. I really think that we're all there. It's just whether or not we're choosing to see it or not. But the difference is that when we choose to open up to this perception of life, knowing that everything that we do is bigger than us, tapping into the collective, the integrated energy network around us, within our planet, within the galaxy, within our community, we start to have these awarenesses, and we still, even though we're doing all the things and practicing things, we're meditating, we're doing yoga, we're journaling, we're praying, we're eating healthy, we're doing all the things, the ego still comes in, creates attachment, and we become totally caught up in things outside of us, externally, believing that that is what's going to save us. And that is where, to me, spiritual materialism, the idea of it starts to manifest within us, and it becomes unhealthy. Then we can feel unfulfilled. We're doing all the things we think we're supposed to do, but we feel unfulfilled inside. So examples of spiritual materialism look like seeking and believing that if we do all the right things, we are, quote, a spiritually aligned person. But we still find ourselves being judgmental. We still feel unfulfilled. We still have lack of trust. We're still really disconnected. And how it can show up is through the ego in thinking that people need us. Oh, I have to stand in my truth because people need me, right? We start to make it about us. We start to use words or claim a certain sort of like status because of our work. Like we might claim that we're enlightened or awakened, and the people who aren't where we are not, which then again reinforces our sense of self or ego. Anytime we find ourselves reinforcing and self-actualizing the ego, the attachment to our part in it, and we all do this, I still do it, then we know that we are in ego. We start to give our resources away outside of us to enhance our lives, right? So I have to have these crystals, and I have to read this book, and I have to do this training, and I have to have this healing, and I have to look a certain way to be a more, quote, spiritual person. That's another way that spiritual materialism can show up. It can show up in really imbalanced meditative practice, where we either think it has to look a certain way, or we're doing meditation, but we're not being in it. So anytime we find ourselves doing the thing, it's still outside of us, but when we embody it, when we are being in it, it no longer looks like work. And that is really where we're moving to, is the yoga, the meditation, the eating healthy, the spiritual alignment, the praying, the compassion, the peace, the love, and joy. They aren't outside of us. We become them. We live them in the moment. We practice meditation and presence throughout the day. We don't have to be attached to whether or not we had our 20 minutes of silence this morning or whether or not we had that yoga practice. Those things are great and they help. And they are the practice, they are the way. But when it becomes fully integrated into your being, where you don't even really have to tell people about it anymore, you don't have to prove anything, you don't change whether or not your practice is consistent and looks the same every day, but you allow yourself to be in the flow of practicing those beliefs in the moment, then it's no longer outside of you. It's no longer materialized outside of you. And another one, a big one that I see is this idea of law of attraction. And, I had an episode on here around law of attraction, but what I notice is the belief of people manifesting, attracting, or desiring again outside of you. If I manifest or attract this, then I will feel this, rather than being totally in the moment of gratitude for where you are and how you do feel. But thinking that the thing that you're wanting to manifest, whether it's the love of your life, more money, health, thinking that that is outside of you. As long as you believe that there's something outside of you and you're attached to that, bringing you your happiness, the perception that it's separate from us is where the suffering is. It's where we become uncomfortable. So I'm going to drop this link in the show notes. I read this quote: "Spiritual materialism is an attachment to the spiritual path as a solid accomplishment or possession. It is said that spiritual materialism is the hardest to overcome. The imagery that is used, that of the golden chains, you're not just in chains, you're in golden chains. And that you love your chains because they're beautiful and shiny, but you're not free. You're just trapped in a bigger and better trap. The point of spiritual practice is to become free, not to build a trap that may have the appearance of a mansion, but is still in a prison." And so this is by Caplan. I got this off of lonerwolf.com, which is a great resource for shadow work. And, what that means to me is, and what I have witnessed is that idea that we begin to wake up and we realize we're still trapped. And then we start to kind of like fake it till we make it, which I'm okay with sometimes. But we start to think that if we do all the right things, then I'll be happy. If I do the right things, if I do this, then I'll attract this. But the truth is that you already are everything that you're seeking. And so spiritual materialism is still the idea that we have to seek something outside of ourselves. Yes, we need support. Yes, it's a way that we receive. Yes, we are worthy. And we also have everything that we need inside of us. The question is, how do we find it? And are we willing to receive it? So anytime we find ourselves talking about spirituality in a way that is sounds like we think we're better than somebody, or when we feel the need to be validated or make somebody else wrong, this is a really big thing, religion versus spirituality. And I've had my own feelings about this. I was raised Christian. I feel very, very connected to Christ and Mary Magdalene. And I have acquaintances in my life who still believe that New Age spirituality is a sin. And yet I believe that I know myself and I know my relationship with God, with Christ, who happens to be somebody that I communicate with and have my entire life, that if it was really a sin, then why would this be so easy for me? Why would I feel so comfortable, so at home, so held, and so loved? I don't feel the need to judge other people. So whenever we find judgment, there's something there for us to lean into, just indicating that there's this idea of spiritual materialism, that we need to judge other people for their choices. Or whenever we try a little too hard with buying all the books, buying all the crystals, believing that we have to have all the crystals and the sage and the card, and some people are really into that. But believing that we have to have that, we have to have that. Now, if you like those things because they're part of your ritual, I think that's beautiful. I love ritual. I was raised Catholic. Catholics have their rituals, and so I still have my sacred rituals, but I don't depend on them. I just enjoy them. So the difference is in the attachment. Are you attached to it? Do you think you have to have it in order to feel a certain way? Or do you realize already that everything you need is within you, and from there you can choose? Another way that we practice spiritual materialism is in our addiction to self-improvement. Anyone feeling me on this? So I've been coaching for long enough enough to know that when we become addicted to self-improvement, we don't believe that we're good enough. It's different than being open to growth. The difference is in the feeling in your body and the attachment to what it means, attachment to results. So vulnerability is the gateway. The stretch is where the growth happens, yes. And it's important to notice the balance of being and becoming. And if you find yourself constantly seeking book after book, teacher after teacher, practice after practice outside of you, then what really needs to happen is coming within and asking yourself, what is it that I need? Addiction to self-improvement is a very unhealthy way to get totally trapped in the cycle of spiritual materialism. So myself as a coach, my goal and everyone that I have worked with up until this point in time no longer needs me when we're complete. That is, to me, shows me the mark of a good coach who is able to bring people to completion in that moment and getting them to a place where they know where they are and what they need. And maybe what they need is everything they have in that moment. So if you find yourself working with someone or in a circle where you're just feeling like you constantly need more, then it's an invitation to just lean in and just check, is this in alignment with me? Is this still in alignment with my current needs and beliefs? And then lastly, this actually came up in a conversation recently with a beautiful woman that I'm just welcomed into our collective. And we did a divine healing session, and it really just came through that she's extremely intuitive and clairvoyant and was manifesting through headaches and migraines, resisting the vision, the thoughts, the clairvoyance. And she noticed that one of her limiting beliefs under the surface after excavating through, what are you resisting? What are you holding back? Is that this fear of being narcissistic. And that is a really, really valid fear. I've been on the other end of this. I've witnessed this. This is a really, really interesting conversation to have and very valid, because if you're an intuitive, doing your own personal excavation is non-negotiable. Being super clear, that's how you notice the difference between your intuition and your ego. Intuition is in the moment. It's out of curiosity. It's in stillness. Ego is fear-based. It feels pressured. It feels uncomfortable. It might create anxiety. It's usually from the past or the future. Intuition is just truth. It's a knowing. It's a silence. It's a stillness within. And so sometimes what happens is when we start to open up to the spiritual path that we're already on, it's just now that we're aware of it, we start to really make everything about us. And that's the ego. We start to think that we're more important than we are. We start to think that we're better, or not we, but some people, they begin to think that they're better, they know more, and now I have to help everybody. And so I'm a coach. I've done this. The difference in knowing when it's your gift to share and become the teacher, or whether you're here because you have to help everybody, is in the attachment. So if you find yourself saying like, I need to do this, I need to be this, no, you don't. Everything's a choice. Then we start self-referencing, and the attachment brings us back to the ego. And so the lovely lady that I'm talking about, she just spoke about spiritual narcissism, which is also known as the spiritual ego, where we believe that it's special to be in touch with our intuition or to be on this spiritual journey, or we're so glad that, we're here and not everybody is. And it's not, quote, special. We're all born into this, but the same offering. We're just choosing differently. We're just choosing when we're ready to receive and what we are ready to receive. So when we start to think that, sometimes we'll feel guilt or shame in thinking that it's something special, and it's not. Our intuition, our connection to spirit is not supernatural. It's totally normal. If you take a look at young children, you will see how connected they are, how natural it is for them. They'll say the names of people. They'll say the craziest things sometimes, but really they're just speaking from their intuition. And if we really reflect back throughout our lives, we have words that we say, right? Like a detective's hunch, or a doctor's hunch, a gut feeling, a mother's intuition. Like, we all know this is part of who we are. It's really the new mindfulness. And that just takes me to just sharing that intuition is not spiritual. Intuition is science-based. You can check out Heart Math Institute for that. More information on heart intuition. And it's actually a natural state of our being. We've just forgotten. We're so busy and distracted in today's world that we've forgotten that's actually a pretty natural thing because we're all connected. So how can we not know and feel, see, sense, and feel and hear what is happening around us? So those are some ways that spiritual materialism can show up. And what it ends up doing is it just makes us feel unfulfilled. It makes us feel unfulfilled if we continue to seek our spirituality outside of us and allow the ego to guide us with our attachment to our identity as a spiritual person. So it's no different than your ego attachment to your roles in the world, such as mother, father, your job, or whatever identities or roles that you hold. If we are attached to our role, our identity as being a spiritual being, then that's ego. The state in which we release ourselves from the ego, sometimes known as higher self, that state of consciousness where we're purely witnessing our experiences, witnessing our emotions, witnessing our thoughts, witnessing our relationships, is the space for our divine truth. Some of us use the word God or source, higher self, that voice, that knowing that's bigger than us. That's what I'm talking about. That doesn't have anything to do with us. Nothing that we experience actually has anything to do with us. Nothing. Everything that we experience is about all of us, our connection to source and to one another. So as long as we are attached to external results, we are in the ego. And the ego loves the material world. And the material world can show up in the spiritual world. So as long as we are attached to our accomplishments, growing spiritually, I'll be good when, I'll be spiritual enough when, I'm working on meditating this certain way, I should be doing more yoga. Whenever we're in that space, we're in our ego. So I'd love to hear from you. How does spiritual materialism show up in your life? Because if you're listening to this show, you're already somebody who is in the space of curiosity. So I'd love to hear what comes up for you. What have you noticed in your life? And how do you navigate it? How do you navigate staying in that place of witnessing, that place of observing, that place of connection to source, connection to God? When you notice yourself getting pulled into even the trap of the ego in the spiritual world, how do you navigate it? Thank you so much for joining me this week. I have to say this is probably a place that I'm still navigating. So I'd love to learn and hear from you and grow with you as I am owning what I have known to be my truth. And even as I say that, right? Like what I know to be my truth, it just is. I don't even have to say it. But as a spiritual mentor and teacher, Soul Destiny 11-2, even just that alone shows up as a little bit of ego. So as I step into my role of this, I notice the ego dancing back and forth, like, who are you to claim this? And what is there to claim? Right? That's it. So it shows up, but it's really the difference between how does it feel in my body? Do I allow myself to be totally identified in my role as a spiritual life coach and mentor for healers and coaches? Well, we have to have some sort of words to bring people in to connect them. But that's just what I do. It's not really who I am. All of the things, the roles and identities we have, it's what we do. It's not who we are. And that is the difference. So in closing, the truth is just in this moment. It needs no words. It needs no explanation. It needs no attachment. It needs no validation. You are your divine truth. And wherever you are in your path is exactly where you're meant to be. And everybody's path looks different, and that's okay. Thank you so much for listening in. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Aloha.
Hello, friends, and thank you so much for joining me today and being a part of this community. I know there are many other podcasts that you could be tuning into, and I am deeply honored that you chose to listen in and be present with me today. I love and cherish and appreciate you, And I want to invite you to join our tribe and Facebook group under jenmons.com/connect. I would also love to gift you your guide to discovering and overcoming the self-limiting beliefs standing in the way of you living in optimal health, more energy, fulfillment, and self-confidence to create an embodied, healthy, whole you. You can find this at jenmons.com/tribe. I also have one small request to help spread the love. In order for this podcast to show up in the feed of social media platforms of other like-minded people, we need reviews. So please head on over to jenmons.com/podcast to leave a review. You will also find other inspiring episodes on that page. So I personally read these reviews weekly and would love to give you a shout out and share your kind words with our listeners. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as Jen Mons or The Holistic Coach with the W Holistic and Jen Mons, JenMons.com. Thank you so much and have an amazing day. Aloha.